The war room aboard the orbital station Tarsk 7 was thick with acrid smoke and silence. A dozen mercenary captains from across the galaxy stared at the holographic bounty request, flickering in the air like a cursed beacon. No one spoke. No one dared. The bounty was generous, unthinkably so, but it came with a name no one wanted to say out loud. Finally, one voice broke the silence, gravelly, low, and seething with disbelief. "Is this a joke, Zor-Tul?" The Undying leaned forward. In his chair, the metal creaking under his 400-pound frame. His 4 arms, each scarred and armored, crossed over his massive chest. The war-bear had led over 60 successful campaigns. He'd cracked moons in half with orbital railguns. Yet the transmission before him made his fur bristle. "No joke," muttered Korvax the accountant, his green tendrils twitching nervously. He was the facilitator, the numbers guy, a creature who looked more like a sentient salad than a strategist. "The client is offering 4 trillion credits and 2 sovereign systems. The target is a human special operations team." The silence returned like a slap. A cold wind hummed through the station's life support vents. Someone coughed, nervously, perhaps involuntarily. "You mean another human special ops team?" Zor-Tul corrected, voice like gravel in a barrel. "We've seen how that plays out." "They're just humans," said a younger mercenary captain, lizard-skinned, likely new to the inner circle. His voice lacked conviction. "Their technology is primitive. Their fleet's outdated. Why does everyone treat them like they're demons?" said Zor-Tul, eyes narrowing. "Because they are." Korvax tapped a control node, and the lights dimmed. Holograms flickered on, cycling through the fragmented remains of dozens of failed mercenary engagements, burned-out mechs, ships torn in half, orbital photos showing human operators waving at surveillance drones while standing atop wreckage, giving thumbs-up gestures with unsettling confidence. One clip showed a man juggling grenades while whistling, something called the Knight Rider theme. "Every mercenary team that's gone after them has vanished," Korvax said. "Those that returned came back missing limbs, sanity, or both." 3 months ago, Zor-Tul added, the Harkali hired 5 hunter-killer crews to take out a single human recon unit. "Do you know what they found?" Korvax winced. "Their ships turned inside out." "Not destroyed," Zor-Tul said. "Not shot down, inside out, like someone got bored with physics." "That's impossible," the young lizard merc muttered, less confident now. "Not for them," Korvax whispered. War room doors hissed open. Everyone turned. A human walked in like he owned the place. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing fatigues too casual for war, and a leather jacket that looked like it had seen 1,000 bar fights. His sunglasses didn't come off, not even in the dim lighting, and his jaw moved with the deliberate rhythm of someone chewing gum like it was a religion. "Evenin'," the human said with a southern twang. "Hope I'm not late for the party." Korvax's eye stalks recoiled. "Lieutenant Rip Jackson," he stammered. "You weren't scheduled to—" "Yeah, I heard someone was asking questions about us," Rip said, pulling a crumpled VHS, tape from his jacket pocket and slapping it onto the conference table. "Figured I'd drop in. Play show and tell." Zor-Tul scowled. "We didn't summon you." "You didn't have to," Rip said, popping the tape into an ancient player, slotted into his belt like a weapon. "Your fear called me." The screen lit up. Grainy footage played. Human special forces in the middle of what looked like a war zone, dancing in full combat armor. Literal dancing. Funk music blared as explosions erupted in the background. One soldier flipped through the air with a flamethrower, while another tossed a knife into a passing drone like it was a dartboard. The aliens stared in silence. "That was Operation Boogie Storm," Rip said proudly. "Liberated a whole moon colony using disco. They never saw it coming. The music, the mirror balls, the shoulder pads. That's not strategy," muttered Zortul. Exactly, Rip said with a grin. That's why it worked. Are you telling me, Korvac said slowly, that your doctrine is based on chaos? Controlled chaos, Rip corrected. Think MacGyver meets Mad Max on a weekend camping trip with G.I. Joe. We train for the worst-case scenario, then make it worse for the other guy. One of the alien captains whispered something about a legend he'd heard. Humans riding motorcycles through space, throwing cassette tapes like grenades. Rip laughed. That one's mostly true, he said. Though we added the motorcycles after we realized the gravity wells made great ramps. Zortul slammed a hand on the table. Enough! What do you want, human? I'm here to help, Rip said, sitting down casually. You're all scared. It's cute, but it's also dangerous. Someone out there's dumb enough to take that contract. So I figured I'd come explain why that's a bad idea. He leaned in, voice suddenly low and serious. We're not unbeatable, just unpredictable. You think in patterns, tactics, logic. Humans? We think in last stands, bad ideas, and punchlines. Korvac blinked. Punchlines? Rip nodded. We're the only species that laughs while bleeding. We joke during combat, crack one-liners while dragging our friends through hell. You think that's insanity? Maybe, but it's effective. He pulled out a second tape labeled Training Montage Volunteer X and slid it across the table. Watch that one in private. Features Sergeant McCallan bench-pressing a trog beast while reciting lines from Predator. Rated R for excessive patriotism. The younger merc tried to snatch the tape, but Zortul grabbed it first. I fought in 5 planetary invasions, he said slowly. But I've never seen an enemy that turns war into a performance. That's 'cause you've never been to a 4th of July BBQ, Rip said with a smirk. You're proud of this madness? Korvac asked, genuinely baffled. Proud? Rip leaned back, folding his arms. Hell, it's our export. We sell freedom, sarcasm, and mayhem. You think we win wars with superior numbers? No. We win because while your guys are busy calculating vectors, we're strapping jet engines to lawn chairs and screaming, Wolverines! As we leap off cliffs. Zortul's nostrils flared. And yet, you still die. We do, Rip agreed. A lot. But we don't stay dead quietly. We haunt your databases. We booby-trap our corpses. One guy got posthumously promoted after blowing up an entire enemy cruiser from the afterlife. Long story. The room fell quiet again. No one dared challenge him. Rip stood up, dusted imaginary dirt off his jacket, and made for the door. Before leaving, he paused. One last thing, he said without turning. You're right not to take that contract, because if you do, we won't come to fight. He glanced over his shoulder, shades gleaming. We'll come to entertain. The door hissed closed behind him. For a long moment, no one said a word. Zortul looked at the tape still clutched in his massive paw. He's bluffing, said the young lizard merc. Korvac shook his head. No, he's not. Zortul stood slowly, crossing the room to the contract hologram. With a deep rumbling growl, he deactivated it. The bounty vanished. You can pay me 100 moons, he muttered, but I'm not going to war with a species that turns warfare into a damn sitcom. No one argued, and somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of Eye of the Tiger hummed through the station's speakers, as if the universe itself had learned to fear the human soundtrack. 2 weeks after the Tarsk 7 meeting, the mercenary networks across the galaxy were in chaos. Not because someone had taken the contract against the human special forces. No one had. But because someone had modified it. Instead of one team, the bounty now targeted all known human Black Ops units. The payout had tripled. The sponsor remained anonymous, but everyone in the underworld knew only one faction had the ego and credits to pull that kind of stunt. The Vrax Dominion, arrogant, hive-minded, and genetically engineered for war, they had conquered 17 star systems in the last 6 years without losing a single battle. Their queen, Gentara, had recently boasted in a public broadcast that human unpredictability was a myth, an evolutionary hiccup, and that she would prove it by capturing one of their elite squads alive. It was the kind of declaration that made politicians nervous and mercenaries curious. But it didn't scare humans. Not even close. On the edge of the Crassel Nebula, nestled between a dying star and an asteroid field shaped like a middle finger, a Terran stealth frigate known as the Johnny Utah drifted silently. Inside, the squad-designated Ghost Knife unit prepared for another op. Lieutenant Rip Jackson stood at the central holotable, spinning a combat knife between his fingers with casual ease. He wasn't just a leader. He was the kind of guy who'd once hot-wired a plasma tank with chewing gum and a quote from Roadhouse. Around him, the rest of Ghost Knife checked gear, insulted each other, and tried not to spill coffee on their weapons. Sergeant Max Chainsaw Calderon loaded a drum-fed shotgun the size of a small cannon. He was all muscle and mirth, with a laugh like a malfunctioning jet engine and a collection of action movie catchphrases so extensive it had its own classified index. "You hear about the new bounty?" Calderon asked, slamming a shell into place. Rip nodded. "Yeah, whole damn galaxy wants a piece of us." "Good," said Private Jimmy Snacks Mendoza, unwrapping a granola bar with one hand and assembling a sniper rifle with the other. "I was starting to feel unappreciated." Across the room, Corporal Ash Deadpan Nguyen ran diagnostics on a combat drone shaped like a flying VHS tape. Her expression hadn't changed in 5 years, and her sense of humor was drier than Martian sandstorms. "Snacks, statistically speaking, they'd only want a piece of you to study your cholesterol." Mendoza raised a finger. "Joke's on them. It's genetically superior cholesterol." Rip grinned. "All right, focus up. New mission. Vrax cruiser in this sector. Intel says they're prepping a surgical strike on Terran colonies. We board. Sabotage engines. Leave a calling card. You know the drill." "Explosives or passive-aggressive graffiti?" Calderon asked. "Both," Rip said. "But subtle. Just enough to make them wonder if it's us." Nguyen looked up. "You mean the signature we leave on all our ops? The one that plays the A-Team theme song and projects the words 'Freedom Delivered' in holographic fireworks?" Rip smirked. "Exactly. But, you know, classier this time." As the team geared up, Mendoza paused, eyes narrowing at the tactical screen. "Hey, anyone else notice we've been getting tracked lately? Minor signal pings, ghost probes, nothing direct." Nguyen frowned. "I noticed. Someone's probing our signature. Not Dominion. Too elegant. My guess is freelance." Rip's voice dropped. "Someone took the bounty." Calderon's knuckles cracked involuntarily. "Idiots." Rip nodded grimly. "Well, now they get a front-row seat." Hours later, as the Johnny Utah hovered in shadow near the Dominion cruiser Obedience Prime, Ghost Knife launched their boarding op. Their entry was silent, clean, and surgical. Within minutes, they'd breached the starboard hangar, disabled internal sensors, and split into 2 teams. Rip and Calderon went for the command core. Nguyen and Mendoza planted charges in the engine, sub-level. Everything went according to plan, until it didn't. An explosion rocked the ship. Not theirs. "Unknown detonation, Deck 17, Nguyen reported. "Not ours, not theirs either. This is external." Rip's comm crackled. "All units brace. We've got company." The intruders came in fast. Unidentified mercenaries, armed to the teeth with tech from a dozen different worlds, all masked, efficient, and eerily quiet. Professional. The kind of professionals who didn't talk during a gunfight. Which made them the exact opposite of "Ghost Knife. Looks like someone brought friends to the party," Calderon said, unloading buckshot into a hallway. "Good," Rip grunted, ducking behind a console. "I was getting bored." The firefight was savage, brutal, and chaotic. The mercs fought like machines, but Ghost Knife fought like humans, unpredictable, hilarious, and slightly unhinged. Mendoza launched a flashbang that played YMCA on detonation. Nguyen programmed her drone to fly through the enemy formation, trailing glitter and reruns of Baywatch. Calderon headbutted a merc through a wall while shouting, "This is for Die Hard 2!" The ship's AI asked politely if the humans were okay. Mendoza told it to shut up and make coffee. Within 20 minutes, half the mercs were either dead, confused, or unconscious in positions that made no tactical sense. The rest tried to retreat. Rip caught one, unmasked him, and studied his face. "Trelaxy?" Rip asked, surprised. "Didn't you retire after that incident with the mime bomb?" The merc grunted. "They paid me to come out of retirement." "Well," Rip said, slapping a sticky note on his forehead that read, "Don't. Now you know why that was a bad idea." As Ghost Knife made their exit, leaving the Dominion cruiser a smoldering mess of imploded circuits and neon graffiti that read "Sponsored by Freedom," Mendoza leaned against the shuttle door and sighed. That was relaxing. Nguyen nodded. "Next time, let's invite more mercs. I'm trying to break my kill record." Back on the Johnny Utah, Rip reviewed the incident data. The mercs weren't Vrax, too sloppy. They weren't affiliated with any known syndicate, either. Their gear was customized, elite grade. Someone was subcontracting the bounty to avoid direct exposure. That meant they were serious. He stared at the map. Dozens of dots, known human special ops locations, were being pinged. Quietly, indirectly. Whoever was behind this wasn't just poking the bear. They were planning to skin it, wear the pelt, and dance in front of a mirror. "Rip," Nguyen said, entering the room with her usual quiet precision. "Just intercepted chatter. The Vrax Dominion is claiming they've captured a human." Rip looked up sharply. "That true?" "Negative. No teams unaccounted for." "Which means—" "They took someone else," Rip muttered. "Someone pretending to be one of us," Mendoza peeked in. "That sounds like a setup," Rip nodded slowly. "Exactly. They're trying to draw us out, one by one. Pick off who they think are threats." "Joke's on them," Calderon said from behind a protein bar. "We're all threats," Rip smiled faintly. "Prep the ship. We're going hunting." As the Johnny Utah slipped back into stealth mode, the stars outside twisted into motion. Ghost Knife unit was heading toward Vrax space. The game had changed. No longer reactive. No longer on the defensive. If the galaxy wanted a war with the humans, they were about to get a front-row seat to the most confusing, explosive, oddly nostalgic campaign in military history. Because what the enemy never understood, what they couldn't grasp, was that humans didn't fight wars by the rules. They didn't believe in logical escalation or predictable outcomes. They believed in duct tape, guitar solos, and throwing punches even after the credits rolled. And the next credits hadn't even started. Yet, the Johnny Utah slipped past the outermost rim of Vrax space, and the calm of the black void settled over the ship. Inside, the crew was focused, tense in the quiet before the storm. Rip Jackson stood at the helm, his fingers tapping lightly. On the control panel, eyes narrowing at the data scrolling across the screen. The Vrax fleet was in the sector, sure, but it was moving slowly. Too slowly. He had been tracking the mercenary movements for hours, and something didn't sit right. This wasn't a typical hit and run. Whoever was behind this was playing a game with the humans, but they were doing it poorly. "Rip, look at this." Nguyen's voice cut through the silence. Rip turned, noting the concern in her tone. "Talk to me," Rip said, his jaw tightening. Nguyen pointed at the tactical map. "These mercs aren't just after us. They're following the pattern of our last few ops. They're setting traps. We're walking into a web." They've been tracking every operation, every movement. Rip's brows furrowed. Meaning they know our every move? More like they anticipate them, Nguyen replied. They're not just going after Ghost Knife, they're trying to learn how we think. Rip turned toward the rest of the team. So, this is it. They've got a blueprint for our tactics. Classic move, Calderon said from across the room, chomping on a protein bar. They're trying to predict us. But how do you predict a team that's got a guy who once reprogrammed a drone with nothing but a mixtape and a pair of pliers? Exactly, Rip said, nodding. We're unpredictable, but they don't know that yet. That's our edge. Then let's use it, Mendoza added, looking up from his sniper rifle. What's the play? Rip gave a small, grim smile. We make them think we're playing their game. Then we flip the board. While Ghost Knife prepared for their next move, the tension between them and their unseen enemy thickened. The mercs weren't alone anymore. Rip was no fool. He'd been a soldier long enough to spot when something didn't feel right. This wasn't just a simple bounty chase. It wasn't about catching or killing. This was a test, one designed to push Ghost Knife to their limits and beyond. Let's make sure they think they've got us cornered, Rip said, his voice calm, almost amused. We'll let them think they know us. They'll think we're predictable. Then we'll hit them from the places they're not looking. Nguyen raised an eyebrow. I'm guessing you're going for the unexpected twist thing again. Exactly. A little misdirection never hurt anyone. The crew went into action, their individual personalities and quirks blending into a seamless operation. Mendoza finished setting up his sniper position while humming the theme from the Terminator. Calderon prepped explosives in a corner of the ship, making sure they were rigged to go off in a way that would make any engineer's head spin. Meanwhile, Nguyen adjusted the ship's AI settings, programming it to appear as if the Johnny Utah was malfunctioning. Rip oversaw it all with that easygoing yet razor-sharp demeanor he'd cultivated over years of dangerous missions. All right, people, Rip said, standing in front of them as they gathered. We're going to bait the Vrax into thinking we're at their mercy. We'll split up, go dark, and make it look like we're heading straight into their trap. Once we get them to commit, that's when we show them who we really are. The rest of the team exchanged knowing glances, the spark of excitement igniting in their eyes. This wasn't just another operation. This was a test of everything they'd ever learned as soldiers and as humans. The ship drifted closer to the Vrax stronghold, the tension palpable in every breath. The feeling of being watched wasn't just a paranoia. Rip could feel it, the weight of 100 unseen eyes tracking every move they made. But he didn't let it show. Humans didn't panic. They adapted. They evolved. The more an enemy watched, the more they underestimated. Rip had learned that truth early on in his career, and it had saved his life more times than he cared to admit. The plan was simple in theory. Make the Vrax think Ghost Knife was a team of amateurs. Lead them into believing their usual tricks would work on a bunch of humans who were unprepared and disorganized. Once the enemy was locked in, Ghost Knife would hit them hard. No warning, no mercy. But it wasn't the simplicity of the plan that made it brilliant. It was the absurdity. The Vrax were masters of war. They were cold, methodical, and efficient. They expected their prey to cower, but Ghost Knife had never learned to cower. They had learned to laugh in the face of chaos, to dance on the edge of disaster. Rip smiled. Time to teach these guys what happens when you mess with humans. They've underestimated us. Nguyen flicked a switch, and the ship's interior lights dimmed. Let's make sure they get the message loud and clear. Mendoza chuckled. Are we going with the big, loud, and obnoxious approach again? Because I'm always down for that. Rip shook his head. You've got the spirit, Mendoza. But no. This time, we're playing it smart. I want them to think we're all over the place. I want them to think we're messy. Chainsaw's laugh rumbled across the comms. Perfect. I'm really good. At Messy. Rip couldn't help but grin. He loved these guys. They were relentless, unpredictable, and completely unafraid of what the galaxy threw at them. And the Vrax? They were in for one hell of a ride. As the minutes passed and the ship neared its destination, the tension inside the Johnny Utah became almost unbearable. Every crew member knew this would either be their greatest victory or their most devastating defeat. There was no middle ground with this mission. But that was the nature of being human. You didn't take the easy way out. You didn't go for the middle ground. You gave everything you had. Regardless of the odds, the Vrax were waiting. For them. But they wouldn't be prepared for what came next. Rip watched the holographic map of their target zone, a quiet thrill running through him. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. All units, prepare for chaos. And with that, the Johnny Utah entered the heart of the Vrax stronghold, the stars outside fading into nothingness as they prepared for the most unpredictable, insane mission of their lives. The Vrax thought they knew humans, thought they knew what to expect, but Ghost Knife was about to show them just how wrong they were. The comms crackled to life, the static echoing in the ship's quiet atmosphere. Rip's hand moved instinctively to the console. Nguyen was at her station, her fingers flying over the touchpad, while the rest of the crew remained focused on the task at hand. The Vrax were not going to let them slip away so easily. This was the moment where it all came down to timing, strategy, and, most importantly, human unpredictability. "All right, people," Rip said, his voice low but steady. "We've got one shot at this. We've already got their attention, but we need to push them past the point of no return. When they think we're cornered, that's when we hit them." Nguyen, eyes scanning the data on the screens, nodded. "They're tracking us like clockwork, but they're still expecting us to act predictably. They're relying too much on their tech." Rip grinned. "Good. That's exactly what we want. Tech won't help them when we make them fight like animals." "We've got the trap set," Mendoza chimed in, grinning widely as he checked his weapon. "I can't wait to see the look on their faces when they realize they're not dealing with amateurs." Rip glanced at the team. Every one of them was ready, their eyes reflecting the quiet focus that came from years of military experience. Ghost Knife was a family, a team forged in the heat of battle and hardened by the chaos of war. The Vrax, for all their vast knowledge of tactics, didn't understand that part. They couldn't. The Vrax couldn't comprehend how much power there was in human creativity. They thought they could predict them, but they had underestimated the one thing that made humans the most dangerous: their capacity to adapt. "We've done this before," Rip said, his voice sharp as he pulled up a screen showing the Vrax fleet's movements. "They've got us in their sights, but I guarantee they're not prepared for what's coming next." Rip's words hung in the air, a challenge to the Vrax mercenaries. They had underestimated every single soldier on Ghost Knife's team. They thought their superior weapons and technology would be enough to defeat them. The Vrax had made a grave mistake. The ship shuddered, a soft jolt reverberating through the hull. Rip's eyes narrowed, but his hand remained steady on the controls. The Vrax had just deployed a drone. It was big, too big, even for their standards. It was clearly meant to intimidate, but Rip saw right through it. The drone wasn't just for surveillance. It was a statement. They wanted to prove something, that they had the upper hand, but Rip was already several moves ahead. "You ready?" Rip asked, looking at Nguyen. She gave him a look that only someone who had fought alongside him for years would understand. It was a mix of confidence and anticipation. "Always." Rip turned to his team. "Mendoza, Calderon, your job is to keep them distracted. I want their eyes on you. Make it look messy. You know the drill." Mendoza slapped a fist into his palm. "Messy's my middle name." Calderon smiled wryly. "I've got a few tricks left up my sleeve." Rip continued, "Nguyen, stay on that drone. I want it spiked and its comms scrambled. We'll need it to make the Vrax think we're breaking down." She nodded. already typing commands into her console. "You got it. This'll be fun." Rip took a deep breath and turned to Chainsaw, his voice steady. "You know what to do. Once they're distracted, we need you in position to clear a path." Chainsaw gave a tight smile. "You got it, boss." Rip took one last look at the team. They were all primed, focused, and ready. The Vrax were coming, and this time they wouldn't know what hit them. Rip had orchestrated this plan down to the smallest detail, and now it was time to let the chaos unfold. The Vrax had been fooled into thinking Ghost Knife was weak, desperate. They'd been led to believe that the humans were reacting to their moves, predictable and trapped. But Rip wasn't just reacting, he was making them play his game. He had spent years studying his enemies, learning how they thought, how they moved, and now he was about to show them that humans didn't follow the rules. They made them. As Rip adjusted the final settings on the ship, his hand hovered over the activation button. This was it. The Vrax were about to walk into their worst nightmare. Ghost Knife wasn't just a group of soldiers. They were an unstoppable force, a storm that no amount of technology could prepare for. The comms buzzed again, this time with a message from Chainsaw. "We're ready. Bring on the fireworks." Rip's lips curled into a smile. "All right, let's do it." In a series of quick, coordinated movements, the crew executed their plan flawlessly. Mendoza and Calderon created the illusion of disorder, sending out signals that made it look like their weapons had malfunctioned, that they were vulnerable. The Vrax bought it, every time. They didn't realize they were walking into a trap. Guyen, meanwhile, had infiltrated the drone's systems. The communication feed she was receiving was pure white noise, designed to throw the Vrax off balance. Their superior tech was suddenly useless. The Vrax were still thinking they were on top of things, still expecting the humans to panic, but the humans were far from panicked. Chainsaw took his position, a sniper's nest with a clear line of sight to the Vrax commander. One shot. That was all it would take. He didn't need to waste ammunition. With the target in his crosshairs, timing was critical, but Ghost Knife had one thing the Vrax didn't: impeccable timing. Rip's voice came through the comms, steady and calm. "It's time." In a flash, the Vrax realized they'd been outplayed. The quiet hum of their high-tech weapons died as their screens filled with static. For the first time in this battle, they had no idea where the attack was coming from. Their plans were crumbling, and in that moment of confusion, Rip knew they had won. The human edge wasn't in the weapons or the gadgets they carried. It was in the way they thought, the way they adapted, the way they used everything at their disposal to make the impossible look easy. Rip's grin widened as he watched the enemy forces fall into disarray. "You thought you had us," he said, his voice laced with satisfaction. "You thought you could predict us, but the Vrax didn't get it. They never would. It wasn't about being the most technologically advanced. It wasn't about the weapons or the gadgets. It was about knowing that, no matter how complex the situation, the human spirit would always find a way to turn the tables. It was about making the impossible happen, with nothing but instinct, creativity, and a little bit of chaos." Rip looked out at the battlefield, the Vrax crumbling under the weight of their own mistakes. "Let's show them just how wrong they were about us." And with that, Ghost Knife finished what they had started. The galaxy would remember this day, not because they were the most powerful, but because they were the most unpredictable.